in an undisclosed location. Nobody has successfully figured out where I am, and I'm not going to announce where I am until I can tell you where I was, just to avoid all conflict. But really glad that you're with us here. Last night, I was checking news coverage, and it was really kind of remarkable that President Trump had left Andrews Air Force Base on Air Force One, the presidential airplane, headed to Davos. And suddenly, apparently, the crew noticed some sort of electrical malfunction, and Air Force One had to turn around and go back to Andrews Air Force Base. And I'm trying to think all the years that I worked in DC, all the missions like that. I don't think I've ever heard of that happening. I mean, I guess it's possible that that has happened with the president on board, but all of these years, I don't know that I've ever heard of that occurring, that type of 180 return back to the United States. I mean, of course, it's better to be cautious than it is to be flying over the ocean and find out that there's a fire on board, or some critical system isn't working, and the president's in trouble, and everybody who's on board the plane is in trouble. But that seemed concerning. I had a couple of friends when I lived in Washington who worked on Marine One, which is really critical because the helicopter is landing on the south lawn of the White House, and it's kind of I'm told, I'm not a helicopter pilot, so what would I know about it? But I was told by them this isn't the easiest landing because you're coming in over a city and you're landing on this little uh, uh, postage stamp size mark right in front of one of the most important buildings in the world with a lot of high profile people. So it's a zero flaw mission that has to happen a couple of times a week when the president is coming and going. So I have to keep an eye on this and see what the story is. I did talk to a few people late last night who had worked in um, uh, the 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 part of the Pentagon that makes sure that every system is upgraded, updated, and that replacement parts and elements of these um, key uh, parts of the movement of top government officials are replaced with American-made parts and not foreign-made parts, because there's always the concern that there'll be some sort of sabotage. And I guess the critical analysis of that and the purity of American-made parts has changed in recent years. So I don't know. I think that will be interesting to see if we can get some sort of analysis as to what has happened. And then, of course, juxtaposed against the headlines yesterday, where President Trump kind of freaked out. And I think he thinks he's turning up the heat on European leaders as it relates to Greenland. He is really zoned in on taking over Greenland, um, or acquiring Greenland one way or another. Davos, I mean, he's basically hijacked the agenda of Davos, where this is what everybody will be talking about. Now, I'd encourage you, if you're a foreign affairs uh, observer, to watch what's not being talked about. Dig deeper into the stories that are out there and see if there's some things that are flying under the radar. But Donald Trump wants to talk about Greenland. And it has been interesting to me. This is one of the few times that I'll give credit to the White House press office for, it appears, coordinating a series of stories that explain why Greenland is an imperative when it comes to the future for U.S. foreign policy, and holding off what we don't want to acknowledge, but which something that is true, that we have a rivalry with Russia and China, which is rapidly devolving into a potential conflict with those countries. Most people have no clue how often we have head to head conflicts with different entities from those two countries. Even 20 years ago, when I was working in the Senate, there were regular briefings about how the Chinese were involved on a regular basis with stealing technology from the United States. And of course, when I was at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, it's a huge economy. You want all of our businesses to have access to that huge um, customer base in China. American businesses in the early 2000s to mid 2000s were bending over backwards to try to have access to the Chinese markets. I mean, really making some, I think, in hindsight, foolish decisions, which put these businesses at risk, assuming that China was going to manipulate the rules and basically lie, cheat, steal. And I've got a lot of friends who've been a part of Chinese government, but I wouldn't trust them as far as I can throw them. I like them okay, but it's a different mindset over there. And American businesses kind of set themselves up to have all of their intellectual property, their IP, stolen by the Chinese. You open a plant in China, you have to expect that they're going to be spies who are going to steal every element of your production process, every design that you come up with. And that's a problem if we have a real conflict with China, that everything we think we own and everything we think that American engineers and entrepreneurs have created is actually going to be in this brain trust that's now been built in China. And I think a lot of American businesses are waking up to that really unpleasant reality. As much as you want to be um, in China, as much as you want to have access to that money, you want to have access to those people, and you'd like to think that this is just the normal uh, business relationship. Unfortunately, it's not. And there's a real concern that perhaps we've lost track of that within the military complex as well, that some of that material is coming into the United States, and it may have been sabotaged in some way. And that's why Greenland, which nobody thinks twice about on a general basis, and you never hear anything about it, is probably much more important than anyone wants to acknowledge, because it's the thing that separates North America and the United States, and quite frankly, Canada, from these potential, um, let's be nice, these rivals in Russia and China. So, what is the appropriate way to go about this? It seems reckless, candidly, the way Donald Trump is beating his chest and making this into a conflict, which seems um, contrived, and it seems threatening, and certainly the rest of the world seems to be responding as if it is a physical threat to their safety. And I am puzzled, as somebody who's been around a lot of these conversations over the years, why more of this isn't happening behind the scenes. Maybe it has for the last 12 months, and finally he just decided, to hell with this. I'm not gonna indulge more back channel conversations when it's not going anywhere, and he's going to put everybody on notice. And I wouldn't bet against Trump. Trump, first of all, it's the United States. A lot of people are dependent on our money and our goodwill and our defense. The European Union and all their complaining over the last couple of weeks. If American money goes away, if the NATO money goes away, they got a problem on their hands. And you've got people like Vladimir Putin who are at uh, looking at borders that they don't care for, and looking to reassemble the grand old days of the Soviet Union. And I think suddenly Donald Trump's demands are going to look a lot less ominous if they juxtapose that against what Vladimir Putin's trying to accomplish. So keep your eyes on that as the president goes to Davos. And I'll be very curious in a couple of hours to see his speech, which apparently the timing of it has been moved, and then look at the reaction, not just from the official press offices, but from some of the other people who will be in Davos. I think they'll be signaling their intent going forward once they check on that. All right, well, we're going to take a break. We will come back. We'll talk to Hugh Joyce, who is the CEO of James River Air. Now, why am I talking to a guy who runs an air conditioning company? Because if you really want to know where tax policy is going to impact the average citizen in Virginia and in other states across the country. Don't talk to the eggheads at the think tanks. I mean, they sometimes have good information, but if you really want to know how it's going to impact business, talk to somebody who runs a large local business who employs 100 employees and find out how they're reacting to that. Because the only way they stay afloat, the only way they survive, the only way they grow is tracking this legislation. And the thing that I really want to explore with you is this push in the Virginia General Assembly for increased minimum wage. I know a lot of people have bought into the idea that that's going to be great. Who do you know who's making minimum wage? And if the minimum wage goes up, do you know what impact that has across the board? And the impact is going to have on the final price for the hamburger that you're buying or for the air conditioning unit you're buying. It should wake you up real fast that the people who are running things now at the state capitol really have no clue about economic impact and the great ideas they're pushing, which are going to wind up being a nightmare for you. We'll talk about it when we return on the Reid Revolution on this Wednesday morning. And very glad to welcome our next guest, who this is his first visit on the new podcast, Hugh Joyce, who is the CEO of James River Air in Richmond, Virginia. And, Hugh, we could talk economic policy with all the know-it-alls in Washington, all the think tank people who put out white papers and opine. But in my lifetime, I figured out the hard way, the best way to gauge whether a policy is good or not is to talk to somebody who is selling a service or a product that goes out every single day, to individual homes and get their impression of how, the great idea that all these politicians come up with and think is going to either solve a problem or enrich everybody, how that's actually going to play. And James River Air, you're spread all over Central Virginia. How long have you been around?
And we've been in business about 55 years and actually own three companies. We own James River Air in Richmond, Airflow Systems up in Charlottesville, really nifty little market, and then White Carver Engineering out in Roanoke. So we're all through the central part of the state. And we just love it. I mean, we're so fortunate to be in Virginia, so happy to be in Virginia. We think there's unlimited opportunity in Virginia. And quite frankly, I wouldn't want to be doing business anywhere else.
Yeah, I'm just hoping that the mindset of the people at the Capitol will prevent them from dictating business policy from the state capitol, since so many people who are at the state capitol have never run a business, have never made payroll. A lot of them have a social worker's background or some sort of academic background, and they haven't actually done the work you're doing. The proposal that struck me as perhaps the most damaging, potentially, is this mandated minimum wage increase. During the campaign, there were a number of Democrats running for lieutenant governor who talked about a $20 an hour minimum wage. Now we're looking at a $15 an hour minimum wage and a mandated minimum wage increase every year. What's your gut reaction to that as a business person?
Well, first, let me just say this, and I'm appreciative of anybody who takes the time to serve and to run and to go down to represent the people of Virginia. So every one of those folks down there is trying to do something they think is right for the state. With that being said, my mother taught me about minimum wage when I was a little kid. She says, you raise it, it's inflationary. And it's that simple. And everybody ran down there, Republicans and Democrats, and said, we really need to reduce costs for the people of Virginia.
Yeah,
And
that was the
that
theme.
was the thing. And the one thing we can do, if you want to guarantee to jack up costs in Virginia on every product out there, every service out there, everything you do, we arbitrarily start raising minimum wage with no impact on productivity. Look, I want everybody to make as much money. I want everybody to be millionaires. I want everyone to have unlimited opportunities. So let's start with that premise. But if you just take someone who's making $13 an hour and raise it to 15, that's great for them. Sounds good. But the people who are making 15 now want 17. The people who want 17 want 19. The people who had 19 want 20. The people who had 22 want 26. The people who had 30 want 40. The people who had 40 want 50. The people with 50 want 60. So that trickles up through every product, every service, every part, every piece of paper, every gallon of gas, every Twinkie, every ho-ho cup we buy. And there must be some lack of understanding about that, because the only time we should be raising pay is when productivity and skills increase. And if you just do it arbitrarily, it's inflationary, period, end of story. And so if we want to lower costs for Virginians, we have to let the market and productivity push wages up and down accordingly. And, it's just interesting to me that no one is connecting those dots. Past governor didn't connect those dots. The current governor's not connecting those dots. The legislators aren't connecting those dots. And what people of Virginia need to see and understand is dots getting connected. What does this mean for me? It sounds good on paper, but we have McDonald's. I used to go to McDonald's at $5-6 to get a lunch. It's $15 to get lunch now, or 12. It's shocking to me. It's almost triple. Well, that cost structure is oozing everywhere, and every consumer is feeling it, and they're feeling it because of government intervention and government regulation. So I would opine to all of our legislators, look, we have got to find ways. If you want to make Virginia more affordable, we have to find ways for government not to be involved, and for markets to be involved, and for people to be productive, and for us to get productive to reduce costs. As soon as you start arbitrarily raising things with taxes, all these new taxes they're talking about, it's so obtuse to me. We ran to lower cost, raising minimum wages, raising taxes, raising regulatory environments, raise prices for Virginians. And so I'm confused as I watch these guys operate. And I know they're all trying to do good work. They all want to do good work. I'm appreciative of every person that goes down there and serves, but I'm on my hands and knees begging them. We need to rethink taxes. We need to rethink regulations. We need to rethink wages and burdensome employer mandates if we want to reduce costs for the people of Virginia. I mean, I can reduce costs for the people of Virginia.
You're a little more benevolent in your thinking than I am, because honestly, and you don't have to respond to this, I think that there are people at the Capitol who hate people like you, who are CEOs. I mean, I don't know what income bracket you're in, or I've known you for years, but I don't know that. I think they're trying to knock people like you down, and assuming that if they raise the minimum wage, you'll take a pay cut miraculously, and somehow that'll solve the problem.
One, I'm not a CEO. I'm just a president. I'm a working president, and I don't ever want to be a CEO. I like to be down with the people, but I don't think there's any hate down there. I'm not going to believe that there is. I think it's a bunch of people down there trying to do good work and do good things. And I think when we start talking about hate, that's exactly what doesn't move the state forward. So I personally think they might not understand. They might be confused. But in terms of making the rich guys, the fat cats, take a pay cut. Fat cat's not taking a pay cut. It's only going to hurt the working Virginians. It's going to hurt poor Virginians the most. All these schemes that are built on good intentions, they are not going to hurt the fat cats. They're only going to hurt the working people of Virginia. They're only going to hurt poor people in Virginia. And the very people that the politicians are running, they say to help, inadvertently, they must be confused, because I don't think it's diabolical, that these policies are going to hurt working people in Virginia. End of story. I mean, it's going to make listen, and this is manufacturer data, and I'm in the heating and cooling business and love it. want to serve every customer and want to do a good job. Heat pumps, things that heat and cool a house. Retail cost of heat pump over the past 6 years. And this is manufacturer data on financed systems. So this is retail. When the manufacturer has a financing program, so Mr. Customer will finance this heat pump for you through Jane Trevor. They see the retail price on every one of them. Their numbers have shown over 5 years the prices have doubled. So what used to be 7,000 is now 14,000. That is singularly due to government regulations, efficiency regulations, labor regulations, mandatory minimum wages in factories, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Those machines stayed relatively flat for 15 years. And over the past 5 years, we've just seen energy policy, distribution policy, shipping, labor, all those inflationary matters driven by regulatory ideas, significantly inflate those costs. And that's why you don't have affordable housing in Virginia anymore. We used to build a starter home for 180, 200 grand. That house is 450, same house, And so we can reduce those costs, but we have to take, government has to relax regulatory. We can't force wages up with no productivity. And we will see those prices, ease back. But it's hard to make things cheaper. Economics 101, I'll never forget it. Over at University of Richmond over there where I went to business school. 101, prices are sticky upward. So once you raise them, they don't want to come down. And the only way to get them down is ugly. And, that is the first day of Economics 101. I believe it was Dr. Edwards said that. It's kind of his first thing and it just always stuck with me. And who wants to lower their price?
Well, I'm pretty sure that most of the people of capital didn't have a class. So you get a lot of ethereal economic beliefs that, fortunately, that's one of the great things about social media is if you've ever sat there and thought, oh my God, where did these ideas come from? With social media and everybody has a platform to express themselves, which is good. You hear the economic theory of socialism, which I think is fundamentally flawed and has failed in so many places that you can micromanage. You can micromanage business and you can bring about widespread, maybe not prosperity, but equality through government action. And that it doesn't have a good track record, but boy, there's some people who are still committed to it.
Well, it's so beautiful on paper, John. Egalitarianism and utopianism and everyone being equal, and just imagine no governments, no money, but it doesn't work. You talk to someone from Russia or Venezuela or any of these hardcore communist countries, and they'll tell you they love America. And what they love about America is you're egalitarian at birth, and what you become is up to you. And we are still a country where it's unlimited opportunity. Anybody can become a billionaire, and that's not true most other places. So what's concerning is that communism, socialism, the warmth of collectivism versus the chill of individualism is somehow become a good idea in America. I mean, look at America, look at everything. Our standard of living, our poorest people live better than most of the world's richest people. And I don't want anybody to be poor, and I want everyone to get more in America. So I'm not discounting there are people suffering in our country, but the most suffering person in America is better off than a lot of people around the world. And it is because of our opportunity, because of capitalism, because of the ability to be whatever you want to be and do whatever you want to do. And are we perfect in that? No. But you talk to anybody, my brother-in-law is from Russia, and he will get tears in his eyes talking about America and the beauty of this country versus where he came from. So we're not perfect, but our unlimited opportunity in the fact that anyone can become whatever they want in this country and with less barriers than anywhere else in the world is a big, big deal. And I don't want to see it ruined, quite frankly, for my kids and my grandkids. But no one's connecting the dots. No politician saying, you're saying this is why the country works so well. Here's what happens. You could do this, you can do this, you go here, you do this. And all we're talking about is how bad the other side is, and highlighting some poor police officer doing the wrong thing, or this person saying the wrong thing. And we're not connecting the dots about the beauty of the opportunities in this great country that we live in.
Yeah. I don't want to ask you to reveal trade secrets or business secrets, but I assume
no secrets. What do you want to know?
In your business, how many people are actually employed by you at baseline minimum wage?
We have no one works here at minimum wage.
Not the janitor.
I don't think we've ever had, except maybe some high school kids, and that was a long time ago. We don't. But, our industry is way beyond minimum wage. But again, the problem for me is, if you jack minimum wage to 20, now we do have people at 20, starting apprentice mechanics and things of that nature, then they're going to want 25. And the guys that are 25 a minute, they're going to want 30. The guys that want 30 want 40. Guys that want 40 want 50, but 60 was 60, 70, 75, 80. And next thing you know, it's much more expensive to get your heat.
I'm trying to think of what industry, and you talk to a lot of different business people, not just in your industry, but where would we find these minimum wage workers? I often in my speeches talk about the guy who pops the popcorn at the movie theater. That's kind of a baseline.
Very few places, mostly a lot of the nonprofits, the very people that some politicians, love so much, the nonprofits, the companies that are, I'm on a lot of nonprofit boards. They've got some minimum wage people there, entry-level things. It's high school things. It's all the little entry-level jobs where, in essence, the business is hiring them and paying them to be trained. And so it's highly, good Lord, it's highly hurtful to young people when you jack these wages up like that, because no one will hire them. They'll use AI, McDonald's is pretty much eliminated, just as an example. And they weren't paying minimum wage anyway. So for the people working in there, but there's no one at the counter anymore. You do it at a little kiosk and move on up the road. So while these ideas, I believe, are well-intentioned, by our politicians, gosh, there's just a lack of understanding of what they do to a whole economic platform of a free market. And so it is very concerning.
Is there anything that could come out of the state capitol that would be helpful to you in your business? Let's talk about something positive. Anything you're like, man, if you could just pass this would crack open the door and make things better.
I would just ask them to take a knee and do nothing, and we'd be fine. Don't raise minimum wage. Don't add more regulations on business. And if you really wanted to be helpful, we would reduce regulation. We would reduce energy legislation. We would reduce, code things. We would repeal laws that were silly on our books. If you want to be stimulative in Virginia, you just remove government from, holding back business, and, businesses move to the state. Businesses will become more productive. So, when you start talking about all these different taxes, whether they pass or not, they freak out the business community and like, oh God, we can't hire anybody. So we go into freak out mode. Most of these are going to get killed in committee. They're going to get killed. They know they can't send these to the governor for a signature because, a lot of them she's going to have to veto, and that would not be good. So, but what they do is they just freak everybody out. Guys like me run around, we go down to the club and say, oh God, they're going to put this tax and that tax, and let's move to Florida. And then all of a sudden, instead of hiring 2 new people, we're down there in some room talking about how do we protect ourselves. And so we go into a flight mode rather than being a fight to grow to business and build economic mode. So we would just ask them to just let's be connect the dots for everyone, and let's make sure we're connecting the right dots.
Does the greenhouse gas initiative that the new governor, Abigail Spanberger, has announced that we're rejoining, do you have a take on that? Youngkin felt very good about pulling out. The data that I have seen, or at least the analysis that I've seen, indicates that saves money not being a part of that collection of states that are involved in the greenhouse gas initiative, which I would argue doesn't really help anybody and hurts businesses and individuals. What's your take on it?
Well, first, I mean, I certainly think that conservation and energy initiatives and being stewardly with energy are all righteous ideas. You know, I drive an electric truck, I sell electric systems, I drive an electric ATV. I do everything I can do to be doing the right things here. However, I think any climate issue, greenhouse gas, cap and trade, you know, all these initiatives where we submit to ideas that are very obtuse, you know, and not necessarily specific to the state of Virginia, are bad ideas. And certainly they're going to raise costs. They're going to raise costs across the board. Anytime you start talking about cap and trade and tax, and it's $5 on this electric bill, and it's only going to be a little bit here and there, all of that cascades to, you know, rejoining that thing. I'm hearing numbers, what, 500 million, $500 million or something that's impacted. And they say, well, the businesses are going to pay. Well, the businesses are going to put that right back into their product pricing. So I am not a fan of, you know, all of these efficiency initiatives and taxing cap and trade. And, you know, I'm one that says energy needs to be cheaper. You know, looking at the country average KW, retail KW across the country, about 13 cents. Virginia are about 12. Hawaii is 40 cents. But the point being, if you want to have clean, renewable, electric powered things, which I think we should, I love them, they're better than gas, then you have to have cheap power. That means you got to build a lot of power plants, and you can't have all this cap and tax and trade. We got to build nuclear plants. We got to build clean gas. We got to probably build some clean coal. But, you know, I'd like to see a strike price of 8 cents a kW retail across the country, because then our electric cars make sense. Then our electric gas blowers make sense. Then all of that electric stuff makes sense. But when we enter an initiative that just says we're going to fix this by making things more expensive and trading this tax for that tax, I don't think it's good for Virginia. And it's certainly going to raise everybody's costs. So again, we ran to lower costs, and the current governor said, you know, energy's too high and we got to reduce energy costs. There's only one way to reduce energy costs: drive up supply. There's only one way to drive up supply. That's build nuclear plants and clean gas. And certainly we can bring some renewables in there, but renewables are not quick, they're not cheap, and they don't solve the problem, you know, quickly. You know, look at Virginia. You know, we're 32% nuclear power state. Cleanest, you've been running 50 years. The things are beautiful. Dominion had an initiative to build the third macro plant up there. It was killed because no one would, you know, state wouldn't give them support, feds wouldn't give them support, would have, you know, put it, I guess, another 12%, 13% power. You know, the new small modular reactors, you know, if I was running things, I'd be on my hands and knees begging them to put these on military bases. Let Department of Defense to protect them next to the plutonium bombs. Let Department of Energy finance them. And let Dominion run them. Dump them on the grid. I mean, we've got nuclear subs right now backfeeding to the grid down in Tidewater. It's been working great for 50 years. But on energy, in the narrative of climate change, in my opinion, and in my research, is a hijacked narrative. And certainly we want to do everything to be stewardly and have a clean environment. And I'm doing my part in terms of making efficient houses, selling efficient heat pumps, driving electric trucks. But that narrative, when you look back, I look back at what I have been told over my 40 years of living, what was going to happen with oil and this and that. That narrative appears flawed to me. And I'm looking
flawed or deliberately deceptive to try to manipulate.
You know, I might not. Maybe there's some confusion, but the narrative does not seem to be, the trajectory does not seem to be what it seems to be. So I don't think I'd be joining anything like that. I think Virginia ought to do what's good for Virginia and the people of Virginia. It's whatever they're doing in California or France. You let let them do what they want to do. But I don't think in Virginia that it makes good sense to do that. Now, you know, build production. If we want to do offshore wind, I'm confused on that one. Not necessarily against it. I'm confused. very confused. So I just, we want to reduce costs for Virginians. That was the premise of this election. And a cap and trade initiative and a climate change, program doesn't seem like it's going to do that in my book. In $5, so it's only going to be $5 a month on a power bill. $5 a month times 12 months is $60. That's a lot of money to a lot of people. It might not be a lot to some politicians, but, and I still think they're in there trying to do the right thing, but somebody needs to call their attention. That's a lot of money to some people, particularly if they're
poor. The cumulative effect, as you point out, when you charge the consumer the $60, they're not the only person who's paying additional costs, and that's going to be passed along.
Oh, yeah, business pays it. It all gets passed on. I mean, I think there's something in the mindset, well, if we tax this or force this mandate, it'll hurt the fat guys and it'll help the less fortunate, and it won't. It's not going to hurt them, and it's going to hurt. It only hurts our poorer and middle class Virginians. Doesn't hurt the rich guys and gals.
We got about 100 years of data to indicate that analysis is correct. We should stop going back to it. Hugh Joyce from James River Air, I appreciate the chance to talk to you always.
Thanks.
Thank you, sir. We're back with more in a moment on the Reid Revolution. Well, welcome back to the Reid Revolution on this Tuesday morning. John Reid, again, from a location that has not been disclosed, just a little south of North America. You can kind of figure out where I may be. But anyway, I'm really glad to see you this morning. And as we mentioned at the top of the show, the Democrats have started filing all of the controversial bills that they could have pre-filed. But I'll tell you, strategically, I think they've held most of those bills until now because they're hoping they could just pass these bills through, probably get them to the governor's desk. Governor Spanberger will sign them. And the next thing you know, there'll be additional taxes and more complications in your life, and you won't know to blame them. Aha, I'm not going to allow that to happen. Senator Mark Peake is the leader of the Republicans in the state Senate. He joins us this morning to talk about the surprises that have been unleashed on the Commonwealth in the last couple of days. Senator, I appreciate you joining us. Can we start with Governor Spanberger? Man, she finished her inaugural address talking about unity. And then the first few things she did are some of the most controversial things you could do, specifically challenging the Trump administration, I think in her mind, but what she's doing is telling the state police they can't cooperate with law enforcement on the federal level. What was your reaction to that?
Let me first, John, I am not the leader of the Republicans. That's Ryan McDougal is the Senate Republican.
Oh, I'm glad you corrected me.
Yeah, I don't want to get in trouble. I am, of
with
course,
Ryan, you're right. Smart.
The immediate past chairman of the Republican Party of Virginia, where I got to work with you during these campaigns and really enjoyed that. But now down to business. Yeah, unity, but I'm going to attack the president. We're going to attack everything that's going on in Washington. We're going to talk about affordability. But really, the first thing I want to do is to disenfranchise our Republican congressmen. And I want to issue an order telling our state police not to work with ICE officials to arrest and deport illegal criminal aliens. So clearly not bipartisan.
Do you think that the average person in Virginia should be worried about that particular directive? Does pulling the state police out of this relationship actually impact safety on the street, in businesses, in schools across the state?
Absolutely, it does. I mean, we have seen the type of crimes that some of these illegal immigrants have committed, and frequently we've seen them in Virginia, murders. So we had rapes down in my neck of the woods in the Lynchburg, Central Virginia area. So we have illegal immigrants committing murders, rapes, robberies, and if ICE cannot count on our state police or in local police, of course, our local sheriffs, they're going to cooperate with ICE. They're going to make sure these illegal immigrants who commit crimes are arrested and deported. But state police are not allowed to do that. That means they're still on the street. That means innocent citizens are subject to being victims of crime. And as we have seen, Democrat sympathies always lie with the criminals and never with the victims.
There are a few bills that have been introduced just in the last couple of days that seem to align with that Democrat mindset that's pro-criminal. One of them I took note of yesterday and posted on the John Reid Show on Facebook about requiring a gun license to purchase additional guns that would be issued, through the state police? Walk me through this.
But we're just getting the bills as well, so I haven't had to look at it for committee. But yeah, and we heard you're going to have to apply. It will go, I'm sure, through the state police, who will run background checks. No telling what else they're going to check. They might have to create a whole separate bureaucracy in government so they can go ask your neighbors if you're ever been polite or ever been mean, or what bumper stickers do you have on your car? Do you fly? What kind of flags do you fly? Who knows? But that's the kind of stuff that we are up against. John, yesterday was VCDL Gun Lobby Day. NRA, VCDL. We were looking at, there are 4 pages of bills. This is just the bill number, so not a full description, maybe a sentence or two. 4 pages, single spaced, of bills attacking gun rights for lawful gun owners. It is going to be a very dangerous session for gun owners.
Now, I looked at the photos yesterday of the crowd. I mean, it wasn't a bad crowd, but it certainly didn't rival the huge numbers that we saw back in 2020.
2020. You were not the first one to notice, and it has been discussed in the General Assembly building. 2020, I mean, there were 20 or 30,000 people here. It was talked about. That was when the Democrats first got their most recent triumvirate, House, Senate, and the governor. And the gun lobby was massive. They had barricades all across the Capitol Square, directing people where they could and couldn't go. They were fearful that the lawful gun owners were going to come in and cause a problem. And as we saw, 30,000 gun owners from Virginia came in, left the Capitol grounds cleaner than when they got there, and did not cause a single disturbance. And it got some of Democrats' attention, and they didn't ban AR-15s. They didn't go forward with a lot of those bills. Now, it's a different group of Democrats. They probably will go through anyway. But as we saw in the election, John, we talked about it. I did frequently. Our 5th congressional district, 6th congressional district, 9th congressional district, all full of lawful, law-abiding gun owners who love their gun rights. And they did not turn out in the numbers that they needed to protect those gun rights. And then I was surprised yesterday by the crowd. And I just wonder what these folks are doing. Are they not paying attention? But when you tell the folks in the 5th congressional district and the 9th congressional district, they're going to have to get a license to buy a gun. And how long is it going to take? So they're going, I want a new gun for hunting season. They'll go in a week ahead of time. Oh, you'll get it in 6 months. And these guys, and no AR-15s. I mean, I think a lot of people are in for a big shock come July 1st.
And this is likely to pass. And I would think that Abigail Spanberger, in her inaugural address, she talked about taking decisive action to quote unquote stop gun violence, which never means going after the criminals who are using guns to kill people. It means going after the law abiding citizens and making it more difficult for them to get weapons. Don't you think this is likely to pass some iteration of this?
I definitely think it's going to pass. I think that gun license is going to pass. I think they're going to restrict magazines. And this was in the state of the Commonwealth last night, not just Saturday. So we got to, whatever you want to say, listen to her speech again. And she talked about red flag laws and gun laws. So our Second Amendment rights are going to be significantly restricted after this session of the General Assembly. We're going to have more intrusive, invasive red flag laws as well.
Is there anything that the average citizen can do besides call Democrat lawmakers? I mean, if they didn't show up yesterday, if they didn't vote in November, I mean, it's a little too late because the legislative process is working already and is going to crush them. But what's your advice to someone who's concerned about this?
There are several senators, and you have to, that are in tougher districts than others, and I would have to look at that, and we can do that. There are probably 2, 3, 4 Democratic senators that might be in tougher districts where it could really make a difference. They need to reach out to those senators, and they do need to call. They need to get out. They need to get involved. If they can come back, there are going to be hearings in front of the committees. We need people to testify. You know, we always have an NRA representative. We always have a VCDL representative. But when these bills come up in front of committees in the House and the Senate, they need to have a mass showing of just regular citizens to testify why they don't want their Second Amendment rights guaranteed under the Constitution to be infringed upon.
Do you think that the mindset is we'll just challenge it in the courts and we'll assume that the Constitution is clear enough to protect these rights? And it seems pretty risky to me with the current makeup of the judges.
I don't think that was the thought process. I think, I think they've got Donald Trump in the White House. They think everything's okay from Washington perspective. We've got control of Congress, House, and the Senate, and DC. A lot of people just do not pay much attention to state politics or local politics, which have a much larger effect on them than DC politics. And so I can't imagine these folks are sitting there thinking, oh, I don't need to vote. The courts are going to take care of it. And I'm with you. I would never count on the courts to take care of those things.
Right. The other big thing the Democrats ran on, which was their preeminent theme, was affordability. So you can imagine that I was surprised yesterday to see a number of bills introduced that would increase taxes on every product and service that the average Virginian uses. And I would think that that would cause some worry in the Democrat caucus. They made such a big deal out of lowering prices. If you're going to add an additional tax on, Uber deliveries and, the person who fixes your suit or your dress, who steams that up or, cuts the lawn, if those services are going to be taxed at a higher rate than they have been, it boggles the mind that they would still be talking about affordability for the average Virginian.
Well, that was, we had a press conference last week. Senate Republican leader Ryan McDougal led that. That was the first thing we talked about. They ran on affordability. That's all they've been talking about since they got here. What have they done? First of all, they've talked about gerrymandering the entire state for Congress, and then it's all tax increases. And Reggie, Governor Spanberger, yesterday in the state of Commonwealth, clearly stated we are going to rejoin Reggie and talked about how that's going to save us all a ton of money. Go figure that one out. So tell me how paying money to Reggie saves the citizens of the Commonwealth money. Where do they think Reggie gets its money? It's off the backs of our hardworking citizens through a tax on their energy bill. And then of course the income tax. And this was a great one, John. I got contacted by somebody living up in Northern Virginia, and they said, do you really think that increased income tax on millionaires is going to go through? I've got a lot of millionaires around me in my neighborhood up here, and they're really concerned. And yes, they should be concerned because they're the ones that vote 70-30 for Democrats, and they're going to be paying a lot more in income tax, and their property taxes are going to go through the roof once we have collective bargaining for all state and local employees. They're going to tax the heck out of those folks, and that's when we're going to be more competitive up there when the reality hits.
Hard to undo bad policy once it's in place, and even if the average voter is mobilized in the next election, I noticed one bill that would ban hand recounts of any election going forward and only use the counting machines, which are so controversial in certain quarters. Are we seeing a slew of bills come through that would address these issues to try to make it less transparent instead of more transparent?
Well, when they had the triumvirate in 2020, 2021, that's when we went to 45 days. That's when we got the mail out ballots. That's when we got the permanent absentee mail-in list. They did away with photo ID. I mean, they're not going to do anything to make elections more transparent and more secure. We know that. I have not seen those bills yet. They'll go through privileges and election committee. That's the other thing. You've probably seen more than I have. And we're just now starting this week in our committees to hear a lot of these bills. So we're getting them printed out. There are about 5,000 bills this year. Normally they're about 2,500. So you've got 13 new raging liberal Democrats in the House putting forward all kinds of crazy liberal ideas.
Do you think the Democrats will stick together on all of these radical ideas? Are they all so far to the left that there'll be no peel off where maybe some of these things can be killed in the legislature?
Well, they're going to get through the House, except for whatever, unless Speaker Don Scott, he can send it to a committee, and he has shown he will not hear bills. So he may send some of the most bizarre ones and just not hear them. But the ones they vote on, they're going to pass, and then it's going to be up to the Senate to decide what to do. I know Governor Spanberger last night said she wasn't going to do away with right to work, and she was about to add a but in there, and we stood up and gave her a standing ovation on that. But they're going to do something to right to work. We had heard that in the Senate they would not do away with right to work, but it sounds like they've got some plans. What are they going to do to it? We don't know. So the Senate may cool down some of these things. The Speaker may cool down a few of these things, but you're talking 10%, 15% of the most crazy ideas that you can imagine. So I'm fearful. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm very concerned about what they're going to do.
Well, let's talk about the redistricting for a moment. This plan to take the kind of balanced representation in the United States House of Representatives and trash it and make sure that half the state does not have a voice in the Congress, even though the numbers are pretty clear that there's certain regions of the state that are solidly Republican and there's certain urban areas that are solidly Democrat. Does this thing go through? Is Louise Lucas is the governor? Supposedly she's expressed some concern about backlash over this 10-to-1 plan. What are you hearing?
Interestingly enough, we debated that last week, and we came in on Wednesday. So the gerrymandering amendment was one of the things. Senate Majority Leader Surville said, we are going to know our maps. We were going to tell the people what the maps are, and we were going to propose the maps. So when they vote in April, they'll know what the maps are. Well, you've got Senator Kane and Spanberger said, 10-to-1 looks really unconstitutional in that the compact, contiguous communities of interest still govern. And but of course, Luis Lucas told the senators to shut up and get out of the way. That they're in control.
And Senator, I don't know if you want to talk about it, but I will. I mean, her comment to Senator Warner and Senator Kaine, calling them impotent cucks. People can go look up that word if they're not familiar with it. I was kind of stunned that vulgarity would come from a sitting senator, even though Louise Lucas continually lowers the bar in her engagement with the public. I mean, it's one thing if you say something trashy and nasty like that in a closed door meeting where you're trying to make a point. But I would think that Senator Warner and Senator Kaine would really be offended on a personal level for her to slap back at them and tell them to take a seat in the back of the room with such a sexualized, nasty comment. Are people talking about that?
It's been all over social media. Yes, I think a lot of people have been commenting on it and talking about it in the halls. Louise is very active on social media, and she is not shy about taking on anyone on social media, and did that throughout Governor Youngkin's term.
Is that really her, or is it this guy who supposedly runs her social media? I mean, I've worked with people who have suggested comments for me to post, and I've said, yeah, that's not really who I am. I don't think I want to say it that way, even if I want to make the point. Is that really her?
There have been rumors that someone else helps her on that front. I actually talked to the gentleman about it. The indication is that it's Louise, and that's what she wants to put out. I do not know. I don't have any inside knowledge on that. Most people think it's Louise, and she's a fighter. There's no question, and she's not shy about taking anyone on. But if you look at those 10-1 maps, if the public sees those 10-1, even 9-2, I mean, I think the people who didn't show up in November of 25, when they see that, I think the 5th and the 6th are really going to be motivated. I think the 2nd and the 1st will be really motivated to get out there. And there are a lot of Democrats who 2/3 of the population voted for the by impartial redistricting constitutional amendment just 4 years ago, 5 years ago. So they're really running the risk of it not passing if they go with this 10-1 deal.
Right. Except that a lot of these Democrats who voted last fall seem to be so hostile about Donald Trump and thus anything that's Republican. I think there's a vicious mindset that's going to be hard to counter unless conservatives are equally offended to have their rights and their vote stomped on, and they turn out. Let me switch to something, because I know you were running short on time. You were the chairman of the Republican Party of Virginia last year for much of the election cycle, and it was a tough time. You were a sitting senator, so I don't think it's wrong at all for you to say, "Hey, I need to focus on being a senator," and step out of that role as chairperson. I've told everybody who's asked me that I thought you were very even-handed and fair, and tried to build bridges with people who were, hostile to me and to our Republican ticket, to try to fix that before the fall arrived. I give you credit for that. What do you think is the most important thing for the new chairperson, who will be elected in a little over a week, to focus on as they try to organize against what looks like a pretty a dramatic vote on the redistricting and the constitutional amendments in April?
And that was part of the reason why I knew I had to get out, because we were going right in. It's going to be an April vote, and so you got 2 months to work. John, and we've talked about this, and I've brought it up frequently. We need resources to organize across the Commonwealth to develop a mail-in ballot program to get people signed up on the permanent program. We have, and some people complain about RPV doesn't do anything. They have no idea of what the charter of the Republican Party of Virginia is and the structure. And they say, well, we need to somebody needs to redo SCC, like the chairman can change the charter, tell these people that they're out of the committee or that they're out of state central, and all of a sudden make money appear to hire 30 people to go across the state to do things. And they're in an emergency situation coming in because we've got an election in April. The reality of that is the national organizations, Republican, are going to put in $1 or $2 million, maybe two, maybe a little more. They're going to fight the lawsuits. Democrats are going to put in 15, 20, 25 million for that election in April. So we're going to leave, and they're going to flood the airways with $20 million worth of ads and people on the street. How do you fight that? I mean, our new chairman is going to have a very difficult time fighting that. This is a long-term project. We cannot fix the disadvantage we have in the permanent mail-in ballot situation in 6 months. It is years, and it's going to take money. And the Democrats had national money to go out there and sign these people up, and we were against it, and our voters didn't embrace it, and still haven't to a large extent. We've got a lot of work to do. Fundraising, organizing with the RNC, organizing with NRCC and the National Senate. The National Senate is not probably going to invest a lot of money for this upcoming 2026 election, but they've got to start building the infrastructure for when Kane comes up again. We've got to prepare for down the road. So what I would say to Republicans is there's no quick fix. And whoever comes in as chair, and I've liked all of our candidates. I think they're all quality people. We had 4 at one point. I think all of them will do a good job, but it is not realistic to think that the RPV chairman can change things in 3, 4, 5, 6 months. It is a long-term project, and without buy-in from our national groups who have the money, it's going to be tough. And but our new chairman is going to have to do everything he can to raise money. And we had done a pretty good job. We finished the year with a pretty good balance on the balance sheet. So we're not in trouble financially, which has not always been the case with RPP. But fundraising, trying to get our units to get along, as you see. I mean, there's a fight in every unit. 5th district, 4 localities will get along, 3 don't. Same thing in every other unit, and then one congressional district unit doesn't get along with another congressional district unit. There are always fights, and some of them are fights that we need to have on philosophy and our focus on the future. But we've always got to come back together when it's election time, and that will be a job for our new chairman. And all of the 4 of the folks who were in it, I think would do a good job of that. No one was a bomb thrower or insulting or dismissive of any of the particular groups that we have in the Republican Party. And I think that's very important.
So now we've got Mike Clancy from Northern Virginia, who ran for Congress, lawyer in a Fortune 100 company. And then Nick Kristof, who's been a grassroots activist, young man down in Chesapeake, who worked for the Attorney General, Jason Miyares. Are you endorsing? Do you have any opinion on these two?
It's Nicholas Prophet. I could
right.
The name. Yeah, Nicholas.
I didn't say his name. Excuse me. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, Nick Prophet. You know, the worst thing that could happen to either one of those gentlemen would be for me to endorse them. So that would be
okay.
Rude and mean of me to endorse one and do in their campaign. But no, I think they're both great guys, and I liked Lynn and Cameron as well. But everybody says we need to engage more voters. We need to bring in this group. We need to bring in that group. Well, no kidding. That is what we need to do. And how do you do it is a much, much more difficult question. And, the national mood has to be right. The state mood has to be right. The message has to be right. And that there's no, otherwise we never lose an election. If it were that easy, you don't lose elections, but everything matters. What's going on in the world matters, and the candidates matter. Everything matters. And right now, a Republican winning in Northern Virginia, it's just not going to happen. We saw the Attorney General's race. What more to be the chief law enforcement officer of the Commonwealth of Virginia? What more could you see to distinguish the two candidates? And you still saw what the vote was. And so I think you kind of mentioned it earlier. The way things are right now, if it's Republican, they're just not going to vote for it. And if you're a Republican candidate in certain areas right now, things do change, and they will change. And when Joe Biden was in the White House, we changed that. I think when Democrats pass a lot of these bills in the General Assembly, and that's what I'm hopeful for the April referendum. They won't become law yet, but I think all these people are going to know what's happened to their gun rights. They're going to know what's going on with their taxes. They know that their energy bills are all because of this Green New Deal the Democrats passed 4 or 5 years ago. They're going to be huge. We just got one, and it was huge. And this upcoming week is going to be really cold around here. Those are Democratic policies that are causing those bills to go up. People know when their pocketbook is hurting, and the Democrats are hurting their pocketbook.
Well, we just need to make sure that they understand that those are the result of Democrat policies on a state level, and they don't get to shift the blame to the devil that they've decided is Donald Trump, as unfair as I think that is. That's incumbent upon us to hold them accountable. Senator Mark Peake from Lynchburg, I really appreciate the chance to talk to you, and I hope we'll talk again as the session unfolds.
Anytime, John. Appreciate everything you have done. You did as a candidate to get our message out there, what you're doing now with the Reid Revolution, to keep the momentum going, to get the word out, to show the people that this really does matter, that what they are doing is going to change the Commonwealth permanently if we're not careful. So keep up the good work. Let me know. Happy to talk to you anytime. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. We're back with more in just a moment on the Reid Revolution. Stay with us. And we're back on the Reid Revolution. Lots to talk about today. Producer Dan rejoins us now, and I'm glad to see you. I thought you was pretty interesting. He's trying to be really, really nice. He's trying to be very even-handed. Did you sense that in the conversation?
I did. And I'm very interested to talk about some of these things. I know Hugh was talking about how a lot of this stuff doesn't make sense economically, and he didn't necessarily say this. You didn't necessarily say this or that, but this general idea that well, socialism, communism, it's a great idea in theory. Nothing gets me more agitated than hearing that. It's a terrible idea in theory. We need to talk about what this actually is. This is a policy of robbing Peter to pay Paul. And aside from the fact that it's not economically viable, it's also morally wrong. That is not a moral or ethical thing to do, to rob Peter to pay Paul under any circumstances, as far as I'm concerned, unless Paul has antecedently robbed Peter. But other than that, This
Well,
is not what.
that's not what they say. What they say is
Oh, of course not.
everyone can be taken care of, and here I am in this undisclosed location up earlier than everybody else around me, preparing to do this program. So I'm willing to put in the work to do this. And when you and I were at the radio station, we were up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I'm so sorry if I'm getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning working a 12-hour day. I am not willing to give up a large percentage of my paycheck to pay for people who are sleeping in till noon. I'm just not willing to do that. And I don't think that makes me a bad person. I think it means you need to get your ass out of bed and go put in some work to earn your living, just like I have to. And I certainly haven't made the money that a lot of other people have made. So if you expect sympathy from me, you're barking up the wrong tree. I'll try to treat people fairly, but I don't have an obligation to get up early in the morning and pay for you.
And that's the key. You don't have an obligation. You have the right to do what you want to do unto yourself with your own stuff, with your person and your possessions, your body and your belongings. That is a fundamentally American concept, and it's also an ethical and moral concept. I mean, to me, the important thing to recognize here is how morally wrong, how ethically wrong communism and socialism are. These are ideas. These are theories that depend on theft, that depend on robbery. And I say to people all the time, when somebody says something like, "Oh, well, we just can't have a free market." The appropriate question back to that is, so a society without theft is totally out of the question for you? Because that's all you're saying when you say that you're for the free market. You're for a system in which people engage with each other on a strictly voluntary basis. And that's basically what I'm for. I've even gotten to the point where my favorite way to describe or define myself is not so much as an individualist anymore but as a voluntarist, not a volunteerist, but a voluntarist, that people ought to engage with each other on a strictly voluntary basis. And nothing could be more American than that.
The story that I didn't get to talk about, I mentioned it on the Facebook page, and I hope people were tracking this. The legislation, one of probably 36 bad pieces of legislation that have already been introduced at the General Assembly to deny tax-exempt status to groups that have had tax-exempt status for decades if they have any connection to the old Confederacy. So you could be running a museum. You could be running a house with a museum in it that's connected to someone who used to be 160 years ago a part of the Confederacy, and suddenly you lose tax-exempt status, which will crush these organizations and put them out of business. Because if you're running a house museum or you're running a library, traditionally you have been able to have tax-exempt status. If you purchased property with one expectation for your tax status in Virginia, if the General Assembly, in its infinite wisdom, and it's not wisdom, it's vindictiveness, if they take that tax-exempt status away, they know exactly what they're doing. They're crushing groups. The response that I got from a lot of people online was, well, let's take away everybody's tax-exempt status. And if you're just trying to make a point that you want to be fair, okay, I guess you've made your point.
Point the gun at everybody. Yeah.
Right?
How about we go in the opposite direction of that?
If that's your response, I don't think that's a very healthy response. And again, who replaces management of these institutions and, quite frankly, the charities? See, I don't think this is done just as a one-off. I think the goal here is to shift everyone to dependency on government instead of nonprofit groups. And I'm for expanding the tax-exempt status for as many groups as possible. Anything that saves people from being taxed, I'm generally going to agree with it.
Right. And there you have landed on the actual priority of the Democrats who have now taken over in Virginia, not to make things more quote unquote affordable or this, that, and the other. It's to make people more dependent on government and on people who promise you stuff. That's been the objective of these folks for generations at this point is to make them
shift away. We're going to shift away from churches. We're going to shift away from nonprofits that provide services to people who are in need. and I'm not mocking or ridiculing anybody who's in need. They're, anybody's at some point in their life could find themselves in a real crisis, and it's good to have those groups out there that are providing support. But if you shift that to government, you're not going to get the same support. You're probably going to get a very inefficient uh, uh, solution to the problem. And guess who's paying for it? People who didn't voluntarily set it up. And
Correct.
let me put a fine point on the Confederacy issue. I know that a lot of people who moved to Virginia just hate anything to do with the Civil War. If you've never read a book about the Civil War, I can't help you. It's fine. You can hate all you want, but be very, very careful about allowing politicians to determine who the good guys are and the bad guys are. Because once we cross that line, let me tell you, there's another set of politicians who are waiting to be elected who are coming after something that you value, whether it's your church. Maybe they decide that your church isn't towing the line on some of the controversial issues out there. Remember, during the campaign, I told people I'm not running to be your associate pastor. So you don't have to worry about the gay issue or anything else. That's irrelevant. If you're running to be a government official, lieutenant governor or otherwise, it's about protecting everybody's rights. Whether I love you or dislike you is irrelevant. It's about protecting your rights. And the second you elect people, like Virginia has, that they don't believe in that mindset of protecting everybody's rights. It's about picking winners and losers. They're going to come after your church. They're going to come after your temple. They're going to come after your synagogue. They're going to come after your mosque. Someone is always going to hate some group that you're associated with. And when we cross in to a realm where elected officials at the state capitol can pick the winners and losers based on who they like and who they don't like, and it's really easy to beat up on the museum of the Daughters of the Confederacy. I mean, like, these 80-year-old ladies are a threat to society. And I went over there. I think I should tell people I went over there specifically to sniff out whether I could find any evidence of modern overt racism. I know everybody's, they want to debate the Civil War with no knowledge about the Civil War. Fine, do that all you want. But these people are not out there banging the drum to try to cause problems in the modern society. They're preserving the artifacts and the stories, which, quite frankly, are important for centuries in the future, about what happened in Virginia. And the folks at the state capitol, the Democrats at the state capitol, know exactly what they're doing. They are trying to stomp all over these individuals and these groups. And I actually think that in the case of the folks who are in Richmond, there's a more nefarious plan to take the land that these groups are on.
Sure.
Because they know that they're not generating enough revenue to pay the full tax burden that they would be paying if they lose their tax exempt status. So I think it's actually, practically criminal to claim that you're trying to try to take people's land that the state entered into an agreement on, many decades ago, if not a century ago. I think that's wrong.
Well, and Abigail Spanberger and company have a fundamental belief that your stuff isn't your stuff is their stuff. And that they are the ones who own everything, not people who are in society. That everything is government based. They have a
temporarily
that's
on
right.
their own view.
That's right. That's right. That they have a government centric view of society and of the world, and that's fundamentally different from certainly what I think. I also would say that it's fundamentally wrong. That logic does not support that.
Well, they should be careful, because the comeback on this is going to be really harsh. And I would think, knowing some of the groups that are currently in existence in Virginia, if you put real right wingers in charge, and you have now changed the dynamic and the rules, you're going to have some people coming after you. Hey, real quick before we run out of time, I'm kind of excited about this. I wish it was in Virginia, but it's actually in Maryland at the National Harbor Complex. There's the announcement that they're going to build a mini sphere. You remember we talked about this, the Sphere in Las Vegas, which has been, at least at the beginning of its existence, wildly successful with lots of kind of throwback bands performing in residency at the Sphere. And oddly enough, one of the most successful presentations in this arena. It's a big ball. You can see it there. This is the artist rendition of what the Sphere will look like at National Harbor in Maryland, just across the Potomac River. The most successful presentation at the Sphere in Las Vegas currently is a restored version of the Wizard of Oz film that has wind blowers and special effects within the Sphere itself, and they've remastered the digital music. So all these people are paying. I looked at
the Oscar-winning score, as a matter of fact, by Herbert Strothard.
The tickets for this thing are ridiculous, and people are paying for them. And Vegas has kind of ridden the roller coaster ride up and down over the last few years. Alonzo and I, maybe it was 2 or 3 years ago, it might have been before you started producing at the old radio station. We went out there and I did the show from the Flamingo Hotel. But the room that they gave us, which was a pretty nice room, overlooked the Sphere, and they were doing the testing of the digital skin of the thing. And they wouldn't do it. They wouldn't do the testing at 9 o'clock. But of course, I was up, crazy early to do the show back on the East Coast with the Vegas time change. And it was remarkable how they could take this Sphere and, like a big TV screen, it could turn into a little mini globe, like the picture you just saw, or it could turn into a marble. It's just a big TV screen. And the creative nature of it, especially looming as big as it was in Vegas. Now, why do you think Maryland got it and Virginia didn't get it? Just because National Harbor?
Probably just National Harbor. Yeah, that's my guess.
Yeah. But now, how did they get National Harbor and Virginia didn't get National Harbor? I mean, you could. This is
that is a good question, actually. Because it's sort of like, why did the Redskins Commanders, why did they pick Maryland as a destination for their home field as opposed to Virginia? I would think that Virginia would be, at least certainly at the time when FedEx Field, the outgoing home of the Commanders, came into existence. I would have thought that Virginia would have been a much more preferable location business wise. And I would think that's true for National Harbor with this, but yeah, it's that is. I'm wondering if maybe
talk to some folks who remember the history about that, how National Harbor was created in Maryland and not in Virginia. And when you start to see patterns like this, as you point out, you remember Glenn Youngkin, the outgoing governor, the most recent former governor. He was trying to build that stadium in Alexandria, and
much to Sean Spicer's dismay.
Well, yeah, I mean, people didn't want it there, but Louise Lucas killed that. So what is it? Could somebody point to me some major projects that Virginia has won when they're in competition with Maryland? I'm trying to think objectively, honestly.
Yeah, no, it's I'm struggling too. And I know that what, something like 8 or 10 of the wealthiest counties in America are right around DC, go figure. But I think more than not are in Virginia of those 8 or 10. So I don't know. It really is kind of mystifying, unless maybe it was just government promising more money.
Yeah.
That's my armchair guess, is that the government of Maryland promised more money to these developers, which isn't appropriate. They
certainly don't have a better tax structure there.
No, goodness no. So yeah.
All right. Well, that's the homework assignment for today, is to try to figure out who can come on and do the economic analysis. Because when you start to see these big projects going to another state, you have to ask yourself, why are you not? It's like when all the pretty girls want to go date somebody else. You have to look at yourself in the mirror and go, wait a minute, what's going on here?
What's up?
What's happened? Have I gained
question of my life?
So, okay. Hey, listen, let's wrap this up. Dan Hopgood, producer Dan, we appreciate the chance to talk to you. We'll be back tomorrow morning on the Reid Revolution. I'm John Reid. Have a great Wednesday.